Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard the TV Pilot's License Flight number 41 with service to Manhattan. We ask that you please fasten your headphones at this time, secure your podcasting device, and remember, if you need to have sex tonight, make sure to tell your flight attendant, and they will happily give you directions to chaos. Welcome to TV Pilot's License. My name is Geoff Kerbis, joined by Max Singer and Rich Inman. How you boys doing tonight?
What secret airport do you know in Manhattan?
Yeah, after Sully Sullenberger, they don't let you land in Manhattan anymore.
Oh my god! Well, oh Jesus Christ! Well, boys, I'm super excited to be talking about Sex in the City. But gentlemen, unfortunately, I have some news. None of us are located in the quote-unquote city. So we need to bring in our special New York correspondent. What does this returning guest pilot not do? She is a comedian, content creator, and fashion icon. It is also rumored that she has even been rubbing elbows with the next Donald Trump of New York, except hotter, younger, and thank God, not Donald Trump. Please welcome Rosey Blair to the podcast.
Yeah.
Rosie.
Hi. Champion.
With martini in hand.
Hi,
Did you make a Cosmo?
No, this is a Dr. Pepper in a fancy glass. I had to do it.
Well, Rosie, thank you so much for joining us. It only felt appropriate, we talked about girls, which almost felt like our generation Sex in the City, to bring you back and talk about really the original as a whole. I'm curious, before we hear about what this podcast is about, what is your prior relationship to Sex in the City?
Oh my God. I'll try not to monologue too much, but I was talking to a friend about this, and it's hard to be a woman in my particular age group without it severely impacting our DNA, like from childhood forward, because I specifically remember watching the pilot. I was 10 years old and on a trip to New York City with my grandmother. And this woman, she's a character. She passed away when she was nearing 100, about a decade ago. So she's definitely of a different generation. And this woman let me wander around the city by myself, like as a child. But also she'd conk out around 8, and then I'd have full television access, full cable television access in our hotel. And I just remember I couldn't get enough of this. Like, enough of the first season had been out that I got to devour a few episodes like nightly. They were running like reruns of it, but it impacted me then. In high school, I purchased the DVDs from Blockbuster, like the resale of the DVDs, and my very religious mother, I remember her like cracking them and like throwing them in the trash when she discovered that I had them.
God.
So I feel like most millennial women, like we've had this sort of like, it was our idea of what womanhood would be once we got there, I think, seeing this show. And I think I'm no different. So yeah.
That's a wild story, first of all. But like I think it does such a good job of encapsulating that this gigantic piece of media has somehow hit your life in a way that, like, we didn't even talk about it. We were just sort of like, Rosie, do you want to do Sex in the City? And you were like, like, let's go right now.
I know, and I just gave you so much.
What Rosie's story reminds me of, though, is it's a thing that today's generations won't appreciate, which is the discovery of HBO when your parent, grandparent, guardian went to sleep. Now you just like turn on like an app on your TV. You could watch it on your phone or your tablet, but there was something about finding the HBO channel in the guide and watching this like made for adults style TV. I feel like HBO shows are a little more ubiquitous and like across generations now. Things like Game of Thrones, like everyone just watches them regardless. And like Sex in the City was this mysterious show that I remember being, like a preteen and a teen during its run, and just like hearing about it, like knowing that it had this like adult content, but not knowing what it means, and it being this version of New York that I, as like a young Jewish boy in the suburbs of Connecticut, could only dream of being in one day.
Max, we weren't ready for shaky cam back then.
Yeah.
Well, for those who don't know, the reason that we're doing this episode this week is it is the 25th anniversary of Sex in the City, which is absolutely wild. So those of you who joined us for the celebration, thanks for coming. And if you're new to the podcast, Max, why don't you tell them a little bit about what we're all about?
Here at TV Pilot's License, we break down and analyze the pilot episodes of some of TV's most famous, or in some cases, infamous shows, like the last one that this showrunner did. We talk about how they came to be and if they're effective pilots and make us want to watch more. If you want to go back and check out our episodes, we are wherever you get your podcasts from. So go, listen, like, and subscribe. Check us out on YouTube to see the incredible glassware that Rosey is drinking a Dr. Pepper out of. And if it is your first time flying with us, then welcome aboard today.
And Rich, what is your question of the week?
So prior to recording, I sent all of you a link to a Sex and the City character quiz, a BuzzFeed staple, really built an entire media conglomerate off of Sex and the City type quizzes. And I wanted to know, what character did you get? And do you think it is correct?
No, I don't think it's correct. But I do. In college, a friend of mine said, we all think we're the other ones, but we're all Miranda. And I got Miranda. I think I'm just like, I do simply think that it's because I'm like married and not currently dating and like don't have like any room for bullshit in my life. And I guess I'm like pragmatic. And it also is, I mean, your show focuses on pilots, so I think that the portrayal of these characters in the pilot is a touch different than the overarching arc of how they later go on to be known. Yeah, I guess I'm pretty direct, like Miranda. I'm neurotic. I don't deal with a lot of things, but she's a little bit of a softie at the end of the day. So I guess, and I feel like I did marry like a Steve sort of guy. So that aligns with stuff.
Max, I'm genuinely curious. What did you get?
So I reached out to the very legitimate website, brainfall.com, and I learned that I am a Carrie. And from that, I'm not afraid of... I know what I want out of a relationship, and I'm not afraid to keep moving until I get it. Wit and charm are my biggest turn-ons, and I like guys who appreciate you for your mind as much as your body. I have fun playing the dating game, but secretly, I just can't wait to find the guy who sweeps me off my feet and carries me into the sunset.
So I'll go after Max. I also got Carrie. You failed to mention not the result you wanted, see other results. I was so upset that I got Carrie that I then went and found a BuzzFeed quiz to see if I am still Carrie. And then, guess what? I got Carrie. You probably think you're a Samantha or a Charlotte, but you're actually Carrie, a total Carrie.
So my BuzzFeed result told me I'm a Samantha.
Oh,
but my
wow.
Brainfall result told me I'm a Carrie. What does that mean? What is my Carrie Moon like, Samantha Rising? What am I?
Yeah, I was just about to say, that's like, we're both Scorpios, but we're actually Carrie Moon Risings. It's all good.
It's the Gryffindor of Sex and the City.
Rich, I'm curious, what is your Sex and the City character?
I am also a Miranda. That is, I definitely think I definitely think that suits me a little bit. I'm a little bit boring. I can fall in love and not make a big deal about it. I'll be an independent person, but yeah, I think they nailed it. If I had to go with anyone, I'm just glad I'm not a Carrie, because that 3-in-1 podcast is like too much. That's crazy.
We would have to rename the podcast to the 3 Carries.
This feels so appropriate though that no one got Charlotte, because that is the character who I forget about the most in Sex and the City. Like for the longest time, I couldn't remember who the 4th person was, and it's Charlotte.
Oh my god. Well, Rich, thank you for that question of the week. Before we dive in too much to Sex and the City, let's talk a little bit about a synopsis. 4 female New Yorkers gossip about their lives, or lack thereof, and find new ways to deal with being a woman in the late 1990s. That's a pretty great description and appealing as a whole, but Max, how did this show get made?
So, as I teased earlier, we are talking about a returning showrunner today, and that is Darren Star. We happen to talk about this writer on his most prolific show. If you go back and listen to our episode on Kitchen Confidential, the one-season flop on Fox, starring Bradley Cooper as definitely not Anthony Bourdain. So today we are talking about the pilot episode of Sex and the City, titled Sex and the City, which aired on HBO on June 6, 1998. Happy 25th anniversary. And just to kind of recap Star again, he comes to prominence creating the teen drama Beverly Hills 90210 for Fox, which premiered in 1990, becomes a smash hit and flagship show for the Young Network. 2 years later, he creates the spinoff Melrose Place, and he ends up kind of pivoting from LA to New York to work on a slightly less successful show that was called Central Park West. And it's while working on this show that he gets interviewed for Vogue by a writer named Candace Bushnell. We're going to flip it over to her now. So Bushnell is a writer and journalist who in 1994 starts writing a column for the New York Observer titled Sex and the City. This sort of guide to dating and life and just like being an adult single trying to find love in New York. The column becomes a hit, and in 1996, these columns are actually published into a book, which Darren Star then purchases the rights to for $50,000, which, when you think back on it, I think Darren Star made off like a bandit there.
Pretty sweet deal.
So Star initially pitches this show to ABC, which would have been a very, very different show, before bringing it to HBO, where the cable platform would hopefully be a better fit for the content, a show that could be more direct on sex talk and not just trading euphemisms the way that shows of the time did. Stars actually described the pilot's comedy styling as being the same things as Seinfeld, but dialed up, which is a thing that I'm glad I read after I watched the pilot and not before.
Yeah.
Then HBO chief Chris Albrecht is intrigued by the fact that there's nothing else like this on TV at the time and is really impressed with Star's belief in the concept and gives the show a green light. This pilot is actually directed by someone pretty prominent as well, a director by the name of Susan Seidelman, who is a 80s indie directing legend. She directed the film Smithereens, which was the first American indie ever to be selected for screening and competition at Cannes, as well as classic comedies of the decade, including Desperately Seeking Susan, Making Mr. Right, She-Devil, and Cookie. And that takes us to a jazzy little intro, I believe.
Wow. So, Max, I have to say, when you said a pretty notable director, I was about to be like, if Jimmy Burrows did this goddamn show, I'm going to lose my damn mind. He's following me everywhere.
Friends and Sex and the City back to back.
That would be wild. Well, thank you, Max, for that bit of a rundown. Let's dive in. This show starts off with just a jazz intro, and I have to think HBO said, we have $10. Let's make an intro to a HBO show with just as much B-roll footage as we have, and throw Sarah Jessica Parker just in the middle of Manhattan
and
don't tell her there's a camera.
60 seconds of Sarah Jessica Parker just looking at things.
Look, New York is a visual environment, baby.
So I think it's so intriguing because they have this, very iconic music as a whole that is just there. And to seem like this show we're talking about a show that's 25 years old and so iconic. But then you look at this intro and you're sort of like, this is it? Like, this is this big show.
Well, I know you're saying that, you're knocking it, Jeff, but we meet two of our main characters right away. We meet Carrie.
Shut the fuck up,
and
Max.
we meet the city.
Because we all know that the city is the fifth main character of the show.
That's right.
Yeah.
Oh my god. As soon as this ends, though, and after we get this B-roll montage, we go into the beginning of the show as almost what seems to be an exposition dump. But really, is just Carrie's character telling the story of a character that, spoiler alert, if you watch past the pilot, we never see again or hear about ever again in the history of this show. But I think it does such a good idea of giving us this dump to set the tone of this is life for a single woman in New York. And this is the story that we will be telling just through 4 different women in this instance as a whole. What did you guys think about this?
I read the book in high school, and a lot of it is actually interviews with Bushnell and New Yorkers, her friends, and then it has this like same setup as the show. And I think that this pilot is very faithful to the tone of the book, and it just seemed like it's like an advice book more than it's not like a fictionalization like this television show is. It's just like New Yorkers talking about their sex lives. And there's lots of like, kind of like, oh, I once heard of this woman and this happened. And so it's sort of this like third party, reiterating a story that happened to someone else. And I think that this is like such a like 1-to-1 of what the book is like. And this whole pilot feels like it's just, gossip heard around like the social sphere of these New York women of like, this is what happens. It's like a little fable that's setting everything up.
You get to hear a little bit of what women at this particular point, or the women that they actually interview for this book, for the show, actually value in men at this particular point. Like the first thing you learn about the guy that Elizabeth is dating is like really powerful, investment broker, makes $2 million a year. They met at an art show. They immediately like go to a driving range, the one that's like at Chelsea Pier or whatever. And it's that as the prominent part. Then the sex is good. Then they're looking at houses. Everything happens in like an extremely like quick amount of time. And I don't know. I think it just sets, I think it kind of counteracts like what Samantha says immediately following this, and that they're like, there's so many, this is the first time that women have had as much power and money in New York, and that's why they're going to start sleeping with people like in the way that a man would classically do. And I think it's just, I think it was interesting to see what people want to gossip about. It's very like New York Times wedding section kind of thing. It's just very like, oh, we're only going to get written up if we make an assload of money, if our parents are famous, if we live in the Hamptons, etc. And that's what I think is like very fascinating, because it definitely contradicts a lot of like the power movement of that.
So, Rosey, one question that I have for you is this episode of Sex and the City and the first half of the first season is a little bit different than the rest of the show, in that we break the fourth wall a lot in this episode. And it's
that stops?
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
Wait, what?
So
really?
I guess so like one of the things that I'm curious for you going back to this pilot, having like this relationship with this show, what were your thoughts as far as like, oh shit, I forgot about this, like Sarah Jessica Parker is going to stare me directly in the eye and tell me that Cupid has left the co-op. Like, what is your thought process when rewatching this?
There's so much different about the pilot than the rest of the show. The pilot has this, like, you mentioned shaky cam earlier. Like, they wanted this realistic, kind of gritty portrayal of what it's like to be a single woman in New York, and that it's tough. But then, even insofar as like the second episode, it's like, no, scrap that. We want it to feel like a fantasy, and we want it to be an escape for people. And her apartment changes between the pilot and the second episode, because I had to watch the next one, because she has an unrealistic, beautiful West Village apartment normally. And in this pilot, she's in a studio, and it's messy, and she's even a brunette in this pilot. And so like her breaking the fourth wall, it feels so New York theater, especially from the time period. It feels so edgy. Like she's having a conversation with a man, and like she just turns to the camera mid conversation and says something like cynical. And it it isn't the Carrie that we know. I actually read a really interesting article about this, and this woman was like, where's the rest of the series for the Carrie and the pilot? Because I want to watch that show. Apparently, Sarah Jessica Parker had issues and had to have a big conversation. Like, if she was going to agree to do the rest of the series, it had to be kind of more her flavor. And so a lot of SJP is injected into what Carrie eventually becomes.
At the end of the day, she's a journalist, and I'm so sorry, but a massive apartment or a massive condo or whatever in Chelsea or wherever the hell she lives is wildly unrealistic. Like, this is so. I also want to keep with the Sarah Jessica Parker. I want to keep with the Carrie of this pilot, because I don't want to see, like, I don't know, people who have it all just like complaining about stuff. I don't know. It just like seems a little disingenuous.
All right. Well, I only want to talk about the Carrie of this palette because I was very excited about this Carrie. And what I love in this entire intro sequence, though, is the different ways of like storytelling that we use. I think it's so clever to begin with this kind of vignette that I think, as you said, Geoff, it sets up the broader concept of what we're talking about, the like world in which we're living in, without like exposition dumping down your throat of like, and here's every character right off the bat, you better keep up. Something that I think is so clever and that I loved is when Carrie addresses the audience dead on after saying, "Welcome to the age of uninnocence." And she asks, how the hell do we get into this mess? She grabs a newspaper from like the guy on the street, opens it up, and the A1 on the newspaper says, "Why no one knows." And I love that it's like the newspaper is like a fourth wall meta prop in this too. Rosie, you mentioned the theatricality of it. I mean, it's Sarah Jessica Parker in the 90s. This is someone who's been working in Broadway for like close to 20 years at this point. I mean, the girl played Annie. She was Annie. She has theater in her bones. And I think that this is like, it's performative when it's to us, and then it's reeled back for TV when it's like normal world. And I loved seeing both of those sides interchange throughout this pilot. It made it a really fun watch for me.
I won't lie. I would be fully like in if Carrie Bradshaw was like, we had a lot of characters in the old neighborhood. Like after she said her,
yeah. What's the like Carrie Bradshaw equivalent to tossing a football up and down?
But Carrie isn't the only one who talks directly to camera. With these vignettes, we start to meet the other singles of New York to describe what they have, what they're looking for. I would be remiss as a certified personal trainer if I did not talk about Peter Mason, the toxic bachelor, who is just repping those rows with no weight on the bar, looking like a goddamn animal with his nipple falling out in the tank top. Like, this was, I love this scene of just seeing the perspective of men who we can assume are like 35-ish, like around many of the folks on this podcast's age. But also then getting the strict contrast of like, I love the intro of Miranda and being able to say like, this is what women deserve, but it's not fucking out there. Like, and then we get this back and forth, and we get the Charlotte of like, I'm happy no one here got, if we were just talking about the pilot of getting these characters, of getting a Charlotte, right? Because Charlotte is just sort of like, oh, yeah, I'll play the game. Like, I'll just, like, sort of suck.
You know what this really reminded me of? And I'm curious if anyone else got this vibe from it, too. It felt like the 90s in-your-face version of the How We Met stories from When Harry Met Sally.
Yes, I have that note in my... I'm so glad you said that. I literally have that.
Yeah, because that came out in 89, and it sort of felt like When Harry Met Sally is this now, like, we're not telling that story. We're not telling this 80s Nora Ephron, like, picture perfect, be cute. We're telling you is going to be, like, it's in your face. It's going to be rude and crude and have tude, but it's like, it's still something that feels very familiar to an audience watching.
You know what's something also very familiar? celebrating a birthday with a bunch of drag queens bringing you a cake. And you know what? It is
That's
June
real
when
New
we're
York,
recording
baby.
this.
Real New York drag queens.
Happy Pride, y'all, with birthday cake with drag queens. And I really loved this scene because I think that this was our first instance of getting a different representation of real women in their 30s and real conversations that women in their 30s are having.
What is this restaurant they're in, though? It's like there's drag queens, but it's also like a Chinese restaurant. I'm very confused what this place is. I would love to have dinner there.
Yeah, are you complaining? Like, I want to make reservations for tomorrow.
No, I want to know what this restaurant is what I'm asking.
Someone drop the Yelp.
Rosey, I guess, you know, as you're talking to three dudes, I would love for your perspective on this first scene of just like friends celebrating a birthday, but having some real conversations about maybe the hardships of relationships as single women.
I have to, like, a line that like stands out in this scene is, I think she says something like, we all didn't really want to be here. This could have been like a conference call or something like that. And which is so against the grain of like the true heart and soul of the show is that these women just go out to eat and go out for drinks and like really nourish each other. And it's so funny because I think that this first impact, like this is the show. So this is such a pivotal moment for us to see in the pilot because of like what it ends up being. And they're all in black, which I think they're trying to hit this like New Yorker woman thing. I feel like they're not yet the caricatured versions of themselves. Like to me, like Charlotte is not Charlotte yet. She's not this like butterfly seeking a husband, Prince Charming kind of character. They're all cynical. Not even Samantha is not the Samantha that I have come to know. So it was really just fascinating seeing the beginning stages of creating these characters. And in this scene, like, I think a birthday is the perfect catalyst to this conversation because, you know, certainly at this time, so much value is placed on women in their reproductive years. So all these women are suddenly reminded, like, I don't know if I saw a number on the cake, but I'm sure that suddenly everyone's super aware of like, oh, I have only so many years left. When they're interviewing the men, this guy was saying like, I don't want to date women my own age because then I have to get them pregnant in the first couple of years. Yeah. So I think that like it's a pivotal moment for this show, which is about single women. And I assume that they're turning 35. That has to be the age that I think would catalyze all of this.
So it's really interesting that you bring that up about the age because I was curious of how old was everyone when this pilot was filmed, sort of thing. Yeah. And specifically, Sarah Jessica Parker, when this pilot was filmed, was 33 years old.
Wow.
As in addition, so was, I forget the actress's name. The character of Charlotte was also 33 years old. Kim Cattrall was the oldest person of these four women, who was 41 years old when she filmed this pilot.
We're all doing Kristen Davis dirty here. We're all just forgetting about Charlotte.
Like, she's hidden behind the curtain like the city of New York. And what they should have done is do a reverse Dawson's Creek where all the actresses are actually 18 and they're playing 35-year-olds.
And like the surprising thing is Cynthia Nixon is also the youngest person of the main character. She was only 32 years old.
Wow.
As far as amongst the group. So it's very, very interesting. But we move forward because one of the things that I found so interesting was the conversation amongst women. We have this overall narration by the Carrie character, but then we meet Carrie's other friend, Stanford, who's just this neurotic agent who I absolutely fell in love with this. But also you see the gigantic contrast in the type of conversation they're having, right? When amongst her three best friends, Carrie is having these conversations about what is love as a woman. And then Stanford has this line that I absolutely love. And it's straight love that's toxic. Gay love is just great. And I was just like, hell yeah. Like, once again, happy Pride, y'all. But in the other instance of that, it's just so intriguing and to see that we have these different perspectives on life from two very different people who happen to be friends at the same time.
Something that I started to really appreciate by the time we got to the Carrie and Stanford like lunch scene is that HBO kind of liberated the 30-minute sitcom in that it didn't have to just be on this studio hangar where it's only however many like flat sets we could build, because they could just shoot on location, and it creates, I think Rosey, you said how it's like the meal and drinks being so important to the show. Well, now we could go everywhere, and we could go to the places that they go to, and we can live like they do. And I think there's something about like all of them meeting in like the idea of these third spaces, like spots that aren't their homes or their works, where they can gather and commune, and they're not restricted by, we'll say it again, we'll say friends. Like there's only so many places that they can hang out, or in Seinfeld, there's only so many places they can hang out because there's only sets on the lot they can go to. Here, they can go anywhere in the city, and it opens up like what the half-hour sitcom is. And like you're seeing that happen in real time in this pilot. It's like it's evolutionary in the way we shoot 30-minute comedy.
One of the things that Carrie is narrating to herself is she sees this on and off again man, and decides to start an experiment, or a self-proclaimed experiment, by deciding, I'm going to go and sleep with this guy, but I'm only going to get mine, not going to let him get his. And then this beautiful line of, so this is what it's like having sex as a man, just happens. And you can't help but giggle at the idea of the selfishness and the ideas of what sex was like, and how that's evolved in recent years. But it was just such a like, oh, I see colors now sort of moment. And I absolutely fell in love with it as a whole.
This is really like a revolutionary thing in 1998. It is like, we're well past like the women's liberation movement and like understanding like, just sex more, I guess that would be the simplest way to put it. But I really do think like her actually going and experimenting with this is like something that maybe it was glossed over a bit in a show like Seinfeld, because they had Elaine really be like kind of almost a Carrie in the sense. But I think it was like kind of just like more of a groundbreaking thing at this particular moment, especially, all of the people that they interview in the first couple of minutes of this would have an extremely archaic view of dating if it was compared to 2023.
After this sexual liaison, we meet one of our most important characters, and probably in this episode seems sort of like a throwaway, right? Seems like maybe this person will be around, but if you're listening to this and you're a fan of Sex and the City, there's nothing quite like Mr. Big.
The City. Oh, sorry. Sorry. No, yeah. Mr. Big. You're right.
Mr. Big Apple.
And I really did love this introduction of a character who seems so mysterious, who seems like, oh, just a guy that Carrie accidentally ran into, who, handed her condoms with the reservoir tip at the end. Which is just like, what a line. Like this.
I had to pause when I heard that. I was like, what does that mean? Like for bigger loads? Like I just don't know like why that was like a necessary like detail to add on to the description of this condom. Like, don't all condoms need to possess?
It was like buying office supplies. It was like with the level of specificity that she like totally unnecessary.
Yeah.
Rosey, I have to ask, what other condom feature would you have preferred that she said other than reservoir tips with big loads?
It just feels redundant because I would assume that all condoms have space for that material. And I don't know. Maybe just like something. Did she say anything for her pleasure? Because I just feel like that's more notable.
See, that would be so much better. This is where the podcast gets really gross and graphic. So let's go for it.
I've got some gross anecdotes to bring into this. So please.
What would be the additional feature that you would add on to a condom, Jeff? Is it a fidget spinner?
Glow in the
Heart
dark
rate
tip.
monitor.
Laser pointer to help you.
It's like an aura ring for your dick.
I love that.
Comment below what
Oh, God.
this is probably a reel. Comment below this reel what additional features you think condoms should have. With that being said, though, and after this introduction to this mysterious, tall, dark, and handsome man, we get to meet someone who's a little less put together in Skipper Johnston, who just seems like a website designer. Did anyone else notice the website that was in the background?
Yeah, Mad TV.
He was designing.
Oh, sorry,
yeah,
Mad
he was
Magazine.
designing Mad TV's website, which is hysterical. But it's super interesting to get the idea of we have these rich elite assholes who are running New York as if it is their very own playground, and then we have just this nice guy named Skipper, or as Miranda calls him, Skippy, who is. Very much a pick-me guy, and I don't know how else to describe him.
Let me throw something in here. Skipper is an incel. The Skipper was the first incel of the late 90s.
Yes.
Skipper,
We want to see the other tabs on your computer, Skipper.
Second of all, and most importantly, what are these fucking names that they're putting in this? Who is going out with Capote Duncan and Skipper Johnston? Why are these names? Why are these names being used in this pilot? It feels like unknown male should have been put there instead, and then just throw in a name afterwards. It was like they spun a wheel of shitty names.
They kind of have that old money ring to it. Like Capote Duncan sounds like that's, anyone that has like a multiple first name that sounds like three last names, I'm like, oh, your parents must own ketchup or something like that,
They all sound like fake names that you use to conceal someone's identity when you're writing a sex column.
Oh my God.
Wow.
And that
actually,
in all honesty, that might be the case for all we know.
It should be from the book.
Yeah. Max, you did it, bud. Congratulations! A round of applause. So Carrie,
and just like that.
Oh,
God damn it! We'll talk about that later.
Since we're on just like that, I have to ask, Rosie, is the reason you put your Peloton behind you is in just like that reference?
I love that you brought that up because I was like, oh, it's so perfect. No, it's just in here until we sell it on Facebook Marketplace.
You know what this room needs is a Peloton. Carrie decides to be. I think the really great thing about Carrie and the Carrie character, at least in this pilot, is we very much just use Carrie as a vessel to tell the stories of a lot of other people and use her as a true narrator. In this case, hey, Skipper, you're going to go on a date with Miranda. If I didn't exist, that would not be a possibility in this episode.
Yeah, she's our spoke to everything. It's so clear that she's our protagonist, which I like how evident that is in every scene.
And then we also find out, because of Carrie, hey, Charlotte is going on a date with the weirdly named Capote Duncan because he has this ridiculous piece of art in his apartment that she wants to see. Okay, cool. Let's talk about why everyone's here, which is chaos. Chaos is a nightmare that I have, that the idea of going to a club at the age of 32 right now is the most horrifying concept in my mind.
You call it a nightmare. I'm watching the scene like, oh my God, it's so well lit. There's so many places to sit down. Where can I go?
I know. Yeah, Jeff, I went to a club party literally on Friday night, and it was not nearly as cool as that. People are smoking cigars. People are hanging out. This is not a club that I would have access to by any means.
And I think that this scene is super interesting. In one, we see very many different stories happening all at once. We see Skippy and Miranda's date.
You know what I think is just so hilarious about before we like get into the details of it, what's just hilarious about this entire Club Chaos scene is that somehow every single character that we've met in this episode ends up at this building. Like, this is like the place to be. It's such a like TV trope where it's like everyone somehow ends up at the same spot and all the stories intertwine. But it's like over the course of this, we bump back into Kurt, the guy that Carrie had the daytime stand with. We're going to see Mr. Big again. The spoiler alert, the date that Charlotte goes on with Capote Duncan, he decides to be a schmuck when she won't stay the night and like steals her cab. And when he even says the cross street, she knows immediately, you're going to Chaos. Like, Chaos is the center of the New York universe. Again, guys, I just want to go. Who can get me in? Seriously, just somebody. Like, does anybody know a bartender? I just want to go to Club Chaos.
It is really like the concept of this is just so interesting, because if we go into the idea of like Carrie as a narrator is just bringing all these stories to one place, rather than having to explain a bunch of different bars where all of these stories took place, that's a little bit more reasonable. I love the idea that in this gigantic city, there is only one club that is worth a damn. That a guy who has just gone to the opera, gotten turned down by Charlotte, is so horned up that he's like, scoot over. We're going to Chaos.
I'm so horny. I gotta go to Chaos.
It reminds me of the I Think You Should Leave scene where he's just beeping the horn in the car and he's like, I'm so horny.
Oh, I thought you were going to say the one from season 3 where he's just got to go to Club Haunted House.
Yeah. Max, I'm so glad you said that. Check your phone right now. I texted you that exact thing. Oh, God.
So, getting back on the rails a little bit, we see that Big is there. Charlotte has a laser beam, not a laser beam, a laser beam like pointed at Big with the idea
Samantha.
Samantha, excuse me. Samantha has a laser beam pointed at Big saying he's the next Donald Trump, except he's more handsome, he's younger, and he's richer. And it's just like, looking back, in 1998, hell of a line. Yeah. 2023, Jesus Christ, that is a nightmare of a situation. And then she makes the mention of, like, I could make a man president. And I'm just like, what the fuck is happening in 1998?
What do you know?
No, I have always thought that Donald Trump has had access to time travel, and like that is my justification for fucking everything. And he has inserted like small subliminal messages into the public thought and sphere to like get himself into the presidency, like his own fucking last name needing to beat something. Sweet Lord, I swear. Like, that is the only explanation.
Oh my God. Well, after we see this Capote Duncan coming to Chaos, we see Samantha get shot down in this instance by Big, which was so interesting because Samantha has big dick energy as a woman. She just rolls out and says, anyone who's in here, I could take. And to see this man who we've been told is the most powerful man in New York for the most part, say, I'm good, like, peace out, is such an interesting play. And it, obviously, they had it written out. They believed in what the show was going to become. But I can't help to think, like, in the back of my mind, holy shit, having not watched much of this show, does Samantha get with Big before Carrie gets with Big? Like, I need to know, because just from the friendship perspective as well, like, we know Kim Cattrall and Sarah Jessica Parker aren't BFFs now. This would be an entirely new spin on that as well.
I can't stop thinking about the comically large stogie that Samantha Jones smokes at Big's table. It is
also
the symbolism.
It is the largest cigar I've ever seen in the wild.
What does Chaos smell like? I feel like chaos does not smell amazing.
No.
Well, we haven't even talked about the idea that everyone in this show smokes some form of tobacco. There is no person on this show who does not have some form of lung cancer scare within the past 25 years. Like, there's no person here who's like, oh yeah, they're smoking in restaurants, they're smoking in clubs, they're smoking on the street. Like, there's I don't know. We'll talk about if we think the show could be adapted. Jewel just got taken off shelves, so we need to find some form of other thing to put in people's mouths so that they can blow smoke obnoxiously around their friends.
I do miss the days of like the smoking and non-smoking sections of restaurants, because my parents, my dad smokes, my dad smokes, but if a diner's a little bit too busy, they would always choose the non-smoking section. But if it was a little bit too busy, I would get to find out what's going on over there. And I just want to know.
That's where the deals are happening, baby.
So a few things happen between after we see this Capote scene. We see that Miranda and Skippy, what seems like it will not end, or what will end in sort of like, unhappy night for Skippy. Skippy sort of non-consensually grabs Miranda to kiss her, and then, this was the 90s, and we can talk about how things age, but Miranda's into it, so I mean, like, way to go, Skippy. And then, even though Charlotte was interested in this Capote Duncan, one of the most eligible but hard to get bachelors in New York, Samantha ends up going home with him. And this was a scene that, although it was only a flash of a moment, I think Kim Cattrall did such a good job of illustrating the idea that even though she has this hard exterior of saying, like, hey, I'm not really interested in love, I'm not really interested in love, I'm only interested in sex, there was this small second of time where you saw the disappointment in her face that this man was just using her for sex, that she had to put the shield up and say, oh yeah, I need to be up early.
Are you talking about when they're hooking up in Capote's apartment and she kind of like looks out of frame, like she kind of like looks off over her shoulder?
Yeah.
I hated that. Like, that is so not her. It's just, there's so much, and I feel like it kind of just like pulls the rug. I know that they wanted to have like an intimate moment and like show a more soul, but I think they did root out like what's fun about Samantha is that she does fuck like a man, and that this wouldn't derail her in this way. And it was just like, it was sad. You're right. It absolutely was an emotional moment, but it wasn't like, as a viewer, as a woman, I wanted this person to have the win. I think that they're setting up that everyone's kind of like up in the tree on this pilot and not where they want to be, but it's fun seeing her have fun. And I think that's what I like about the show.
I couldn't agree more that I really think that choice that they made for Samantha right there is such a non-character moment. And I'm glad that they really got rid of that in like future episodes, because I mean, the entire point, and this actually did kind of make it feel like When Harry Met Sally, is that oh no, we're gonna subscribe to this mantra of women can fuck like men and without feeling. And all they did was have little glances of all the women saying that they could, realizing that they can't. And I think that was like too weak of a moment.
It was very interesting to see this emotional moment at the end with the character you least suspected, given that if you know anything about the pop culture of this show, it was the worst character they could have chosen to do it with at the same time.
Yeah.
So we have one more scene. I love the idea of seeing Sarah Jessica Parker, Carrie, walk through the streets of Manhattan and say, another Friday night in Manhattan, prep towards dawn. When the worst thing that could happen is walking home. And then we have Mr. Big roll up in his private car. And this truly the first time they genuinely talk to each other. And you can't help but think they have amazing chemistry. There's something more than just a single conversation that happens. And as Carrie and Mr. Big agree on the idea of we're not just having sex to have sex. We're out here to find love. And Rich, you alluded to it earlier. The idea that Mr. Big sort of ends on, do you really believe in love? Abso-fucking-lutely. Right? And it's just this moment that ends the pilot. We get a really wild still frame. Like, that came out of nowhere. But it was a nice way of ending the pilot to the idea of there might be love for Carrie Bradshaw yet.
What I love about this, I have to say, is I just love that his driver was like, okay, boss, I'm speeding away right after you say that. Like, I'm going to make you look like a rock star. And yeah. And I'm sure they, like, I just want to see the moment after in the limo where he was like, dude, you made me look so fucking cool right now. Thank you. Like,
I do not pay you enough.
Boys supporting boys.
I like how you kind of make the driver out to be like the henchman in like a Dick Tracy cartoon. Like, yeah, whatever you say, boss, will drive away and leave the broad.
You're gonna look so smart, boss. Yeah.
So that is the end of this pilot. Were there any things that y'all loved that we did not talk about while we were talking about the pilot? Max, anything on your mind?
I want to talk about jazz, baby.
The sixth character
talking about jazz. How original.
I just loved this rhythmic underscoring throughout the entire episode. I loved that it made these scenes feel like vignettes. There was a movement to them. I liked that it was like under almost the entire episode. There was just, I don't know, there's like a flow to the pacing of the episode, and the jazz just really worked for me. If you tell me they stopped playing jazz under 85% of this series beginning in the middle of season 1, I'm going to be livid. You've already crushed me at the fourth wall breaks, but for right
it's
now...
there till the end. It's there
especially
till the end.
In the scene where she first approaches Kurt in the restaurant when she's like hanging out with Stanford, and it's just like there's like a pitter patter to the whole thing, and it made it really engaging for me to watch.
Rich, what about you? Any things that you loved about this pilot?
I love that.
Excuse me.
I love that shaky cam, baby. Give me more. I want to feel like I'm watching a Jason Bourne movie while Carrie Bradshaw's talking about casual sex.
Rosie, what about you? Like, rewatching this pilot, what were some of the things that stood out to you that you loved about it?
I don't know if it's like a love, but it was like a constant thought in my mind is that like this, I think that like the Sex and the City that goes forward is not dark like this. It doesn't have so much of a focal point on these like businessmen. Like you see like beautiful, bright, colorful cocktail dresses, like floral arrangements, beautiful cafes, etc. This felt like American Psycho does Sex in the City, and the whole time I was like, don't go home with him. Like I literally, it looks like Jason Bateman's apartment, like this the Duncan Capote's place,
Patrick
and
Bateman.
everybody like nobody has cell phones. Oh, sorry. What did I say?
It looks like the guy from Arrested Development's apartment.
Why did I say that? Why?
I want that crossover. I want the Sex and the City Arrested Development crossover right now. Netflix, let's do it right now.
Girls, he's a magician.
Dude, I love an ADHD brain moment. That is magical. But no, like, nobody has phones. People would just go home with, like, strangers. I mean, I felt unsafe, like, with a cell phone, like, going home with randos sometimes. But this is just, like, you're playing... I don't know. I was just, like, terrified for a good majority of this pilot. And I think that, like, the coloration of it, everyone wearing dark colors, like, it just felt like a dark... a dark version of the show.
Carrie Bradshaw's apartment looking like a hoarder's apartment.
Yeah.
Like there's a...
Yeah.
So I will say one of the things I loved about this show is like, if we just consider this as the pilot itself, I love the fourth wall. I love the narration. it really reminds me of a noir film of sorts, right? But like, it's not a crime noir, it's not a sci-fi noir. This is a sex noir TV show where we are focused on the sex lives of people. And I very much could see Carrie Bradshaw in a smoky room with her name, Carrie Bradshaw, sex detective, and people coming in to tell their stories of their sex lives in New York City. So we talked a little bit about things we loved. What were some wait a minute moments for you during this pilot? Rich, go for it.
I've got one. There is a lot of fat phobia in this show, in this pilot, and it's like really upsetting. And I don't know. It's just, aside from the fact that Skipper is clearly an incel and it's very much like the nice guy syndrome, but it is so like weird hearing people talk like they did in 1998, and like, you know, the magazine culture of it all, and I just like, it just makes me feel very, very uncomfortable. I like, you know, I know we have. I feel like a lot of this conversation was like kind of in response to the Monica Lewinsky scandal too. And in hindsight, we treated that woman extremely poorly and vilified this woman who was taken advantage of by the most powerful person in the country. Anyways, you know, I just like, it's good to see how far we've come. And I guess that, and just like that, is supposed to be a commentary on like what it's really like now, and like when people actually have the opportunity to speak to one another through social media, to learn easily through one another. And this conversation isn't just done in tight-knit friend groups and no information is really passed along, except for like Cosmo magazine.
Yeah, tonally, it wasn't the kind of like joyful experience of a show that I didn't like the cynical tone that this pilot had. It was kind of like, this is how it fucking is, but maybe it could be good. Like, the rest of the show, as they really develop and flesh out the characters and people's like fingerprints get on them a little bit more deeply, it was just, again, it was weird. I think they didn't even have the very famous, and I'm forgetting her name, costume designer, which I feel like became a celebrity because of this show, because that the fashion of this show wasn't even as prominent as it later like really became. And it could be a budget thing, but it seemed like it was relying on like you said, Rich, like a very insensitive, mean-spirited sense of humor. Like everyone was roasting each other. I think even when Carrie set up Skipper with Miranda, she was just like, she'll hate him, but who cares? Like they didn't have the care for each other that they end up having. And they're very careful with each other as the show progresses.
Max, what about you?
I'm very aware that when you're telling a story, you're not going to be able to tell every story. But it is fascinating that New York City is the largest city in America, yet every single person who lives there is between 30 and 40 and white. It's fascinating. It's fascinating. All millions of them.
As far as this pilot goes, I would be remiss to say, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, that Max, very much on your point, the diversity in this pilot leaves something to be desired. In one of the melting pots of the world of New York City, for the most diversity that we get is we get a couple of drag queens, and we get Stanford, and that's really it. And we get an incel. So, you know,
does Mr. Big's Cuban cigar count as a character?
And you know what? I'll give credit to Samantha. The Honduran cigar 100% counts, like 100%. So with that being said, Daddy of the Week is Mr. Big. Mr. Big, congratulations. I'm very, very excited
Rosey,
for you.
For backstory, Rosey, Geoff keeps forcing the Daddy of the Week segment on us and has asked for no input for the rest of the time.
From anybody else? Nobody gets to vote on the
Rosey,
daddy?
what about you? Do you have a daddy in this pilot that you'd like to call out?
No. Papa hasn't shown up yet for me. He hasn't shown up yet. I watch the later seasons. You might catch some of my guys.
So, Rosey, I have to ask then, if you've said it, who is your daddy of the men in Sex and the City?
I have to say Steve. He's so like I like a guy that can maybe take on like a more domestic role in the relationship, and I like that he is comfortable with, you know, the earnings in that relationship. Miranda's a ambitious work hard, play hard type, and he's happy keeping the bar and watching their baby. I don't know. I like that dynamic.
It gives
It's
me
kind of
so
sexy.
much hope that we're eventually going to get a man. We're eventually going to get a man named Steve and not Capote or Skipper.
You're gonna love Steve. Like I could do Steve actually talks like this the whole time.
Oh, sounds New Yorker.
Yeah.
Miranda.
He's like Miranda. Yeah.
I will say my daddy of the series though is Aiden. I'm a big Aiden guy. We do have an in-flight question this week. So we've been talking about how the fifth character of this show is New York City. And our question came to my DMs asking, what other TV show do you believe needs a city to be its fifth character?
Oh, the OC. The OC, baby.
Rosey stealing Max's answer. He's so upset.
You can feel Garden Grove in that script.
Yeah, they didn't say where in Orange County. Actually, no, they do.
They
very
do.
much do.
Rich, what about you? What would you say is the fifth character city in a TV show?
Oh, that's such a great question. Going off of our recent coverage of The Big Bang Theory, you can't deny the Pasadena influence in it.
And Max, what about you?
I think just because it's been on at like 9 a.m. on Comedy Central a lot lately, Pawnee and Eagleton are both respective characters in Parks and Rec.
You son of a
Exactly.
bitch.
That's so good. That's so good.
And I will go with Las Vegas in the TV show Las Vegas.
Kerbis, you're gonna.
So-
I'm so impressed with your ability to not say Miami and CSI Miami.
Nope. We're only going Vegas. Well, thank you so much for that in-flight question. It is very much appreciated. Let's talk a little bit about the legacy of this show. 6 seasons and 94 episodes. There were 2 different spin-offs of this show. One of them, known as the Carrie Diaries, which was supposed to be the teen-friendly version of this show, following Carrie Bradshaw through high school. It had 2 seasons on the CW, and Just Like That, which is coming up on its 2nd season, which is set to debut this Sunday. There have also been 2 feature films for this show. We don't really talk about the second one. And then the third one just got outright canceled.
Is the second one where they go to like Saudi Arabia or something?
Yep, that is.
Yep.
They go to the UAE, baby, and it is something. So the show has been syndicated over a number of networks: TBS, WGN, the E Network. It's also been on a number of different countries: Canada, Australia, Ireland, and the UK. Let's talk a little bit about awards. 210 nominations and 55 wins, including 4 Emmys, 8 Golden Globes, a few SAGs, but no Kids' Choice Awards, so we can't give it the cradle to grave. You can find this show currently on Max, but don't worry, Rich, and don't worry, Rosey, we can replace that DVD collection because all of these seasons are on Blu-ray and DVD. With that all being said, Rich, it is time for your game of the week.
All right. So those of you who know me know I love the names of below-the-line characters that don't really have any place in the show at all once they're on screen. So I have compiled a list of 12 below the line character names. I'm going to pop it in the chat for you all right now, but I am going to read them out loud because this is a podcast. And I want you guys to tell me which one is one that I made up. This is a game that is made popular by a friend of the pod, J.W. Crump, and it is Faker's Dozen. And so I'm going to read it off to you right now. Here's the character names. Mr. Marvelous, Bitsy Von Muffling, Mr. Cocky, Goatee Chauvinist, Tom, quote-unquote, big-boned, Wee William, Very Married Man, Bean Sprouty Waiter, Mr. Winkle, parentheses, playing himself, Sweet Sauce, New York City Mayor Ed Koch, and Butterscotch. I would like to hear from I feel like Rosey and Geoff have the best line in on this, seeing as how they've watched the most episodes. But I'm curious of what character do you think I made up for Sex and the City?
I'm process of eliminationing it because I do recognize some of these names. I don't want to spoil any of the gameplay for anyone, but I know one of these characters is a dog that you've mentioned. I have to guess. I don't know. It's so hard. I'm going between Mr. Cocky and Butterscotch. Those are my two. And I think I have to do Butterscotch.
Great guess. Okay. What you got, guys?
So I am going to say, I know there's the guy with the weird spunk. I know that is a name. So I have to think that Sweet Sauce might be what might be a play on that. So I'm going to say God. Sweet Sauce is the one out.
Oh, you don't mean like he's spunky, do you?
No. It's the guy with the weird spunk. And
okay, got it. Okay, all right.
Yeah, he's got real charisma.
Okay.
Max, go for it.
Okay, so Sweet Sauce and Butterscotch just feel redundant to me because Butterscotch is a sweet sauce. So I'm going to say that Sweet Sauce is the rich one.
So also, I do want to mention the guy with the funky spunk is played by Bobby Cannavale.
Cannavale.
Cannavale. So, like, there you go. The people who've been on the show is wild.
I love
Rich,
this so
please
much.
inform us who was correct.
The person I made up is New York Mayor Ed. No, I'm kidding. So the person I made up, Ed Koch, is actually in the show. The character I made up is Goatee Chauvinist. All of these other characters are real. Mr. Cocky is real. Sweet Sauce is also real. Butterscotch is also real. And also, Mr. Winkle, parentheses, playing himself, is also real, as we're all supposed to know who Mr. Winkle is.
Wait, Rosey, which one is the dog?
Mr. Winkle's the dog.
Okay.
Oh, that's so cute.
This show takes place in the late 90s, though. The fact that a guy would have a goatee and be a chauvinist seems so plausible in 1998.
It's very true. He's also probably the bass player in Sugar Ray. There is a little bit of baseball lore while I was researching all of these, because I had to narrow this down from a list of about 30. They have a lot of very, very funny names on this. There is one person named Large Baseball Player, and Large Baseball Player is played by Larry Doby Jr. And if you don't recognize that name, Larry Doby, his dad, is the first black Major League Baseball player in the American League.
That's wild. All right.
Cool.
The more you know.
Cool.
Well, Rich, thank you for that game of the week. I have two final questions for everyone on this podcast. One is very simply, would you continue watching this version of the show based off of the pilot? The other, I'm going to change a little bit from my normal one. There is already a version of this show that currently is on the air. But I am going to ask, do you believe that is the right version of the show that should be on the air? Or should HBO Max, or HBO, whatever the fuck they're calling it these days, have a different version of the show? And what would your version be? Rosey. as our guest and ladies first, I am going to ask you these two questions.
All right. Well, I think I would continue watching the show as a new to New York person, because it's exciting to me to have it, especially if I'm here, like we're playing, like this is on the air. If I saw this pilot, I'd be like, oh, well, I'm new in town, and this seems to be covering like where to go, what to do, what women are currently wearing, how people are acting. Like I would absolutely see it as like some kind of roadmap. And I'm sure a lot of people did see it that way at the time. It's not my favorite. This pilot is not my favorite iteration of this show. And I think your second question is really interesting to me, because I feel like, and just like that, is that what you were referring to? Like the current iteration? That show feels like so not. It also feels like its own entity that doesn't feel related to what I consider the true meat of Sex and the City. I would love to have an alternate universe. Like, just give me the Samantha. Like, just give me that show by herself in the UK or wherever she is. But I like season 3 through 7 of this show. I don't care about the movies. That's the happy place that I want to live in when it comes to Sex in the City. And maybe we'd update it and add some more just like diversity and less backward thoughts. Like you haven't even gotten into like the perspectives on sexuality in the show. This is a wild ride of a show to get on board too, if you're not familiar.
Rich, what about you?
So I know we talked a lot about like the specific styling between the pilot that we watched and what the show became almost immediately after this, because, you know, we do see that every now and then, like characters get dropped off, characters have an entirely different direction. Smithers is yellow now. And there is a, real just drop off in, like I like now knowing that what people love about the show is their bond together, and knowing that this bond is like not formed at all, and it's like really testy and stuff like that between the 4 main characters. It like just doesn't feel like something I would want to continue watching in that sense, but I do want to watch it for the realness of all these characters. Like I've lived in New York. Like I don't want to see people just existing in a circle of wealth and insane connections. And like, I don't want to watch something that's like aspirational for something that is attainable by almost nobody. And that is like, you know, it's another aspect of the diversity. How many people of color did we see in Club Chaos? So, I mean, that is like not necessarily the New York I want to continue watching. And, you know, for where this goes, and, you know, I've heard also about some complaints from like the LGBTQ community about the inclusion and queer representation and non-binary representation. And I'm so sorry. What's the new show called? And
just like that.
Okay. Yeah. I've heard some issues in that sense too, and I'm wondering if they kept a lot of old writers who are just kind of like still trying to make a lot of money and you know, get on the bandwagon of this new thing, and have, you know, all of a sudden now the characters are dealing with the internet being in our lives constantly. So understanding that they keep trying to do this over and over and over and over and over again, I'm going to say, stop it. maybe do it for like with a purpose. And you know, really understand that like what you're doing is you're taking a beloved character and you're putting it in Dubai for no reason, and you're testing everyone's allegiance to the show as a whole. And yeah, so I for that reason, Sharks, I'm out.
Max, what about you?
I'm not going to get 25 years of history into this. I'm not going to talk about cash grab, spin-offs, and sequel films. But when I watched this episode, my first experience with Sex and the City as a whole, I wanted to hit next episode so badly as soon as this one ended. And I had to restrain myself because I wanted to come in just knowing the pilot. when I did this podcast, which apparently has now been an hour of everyone saying, none of this ever happens again. All of that stuff you loved, you're never going to see again. That being said, it's really fun to take this trip down memory lane and see this style of comedy that I don't think is really around as much anymore. I really enjoyed watching this pilot, despite the faults we mentioned. I'm really intrigued to watch this show kind of blindly as a first time viewer. I do think that I'm personally going to actually continue watching this. So it got me on board for sure as effective. I've never seen And Just Like That. I've never seen the movies. I have no frame of reference for a spinoff, a recreation. So to your second question, Geoff, what I think they should do is a Vanderpump style rules show set in the world of Club Chaos.
That is.
And I will be tuning in to Chaos every night on Bravo.
Carrie, you're an A girl. Samantha's a B girl. That is only for my Vanderpump people. All right, so.
Oh no, I picked another show I haven't watched.
So what I will say is I watched this pilot with my wife, as I do with most of these pilots. People are getting bored of hearing me say that. My wife,
he do be doing that,
is a gigantic fan of Sex in the City, and I decided, and everyone on this podcast is hearing this for the first time, that I wasn't going to tell my wife what my thoughts were on the pilot.
Ooh.
In my hands, I have my decision. I will be watching the entirety of this pilot on DVD because fuck HBO Max.
Yeah.
This is every single episode of Sex in the City. And I'm going to watch it, and I'm going to devour it, and I'm going to enjoy it. When they stop doing the talking heads, I'm going to be like, that was a fun time. But let's now just get into the real meat. With that being said, as far as talking about Just Like That, and does that have a place in the world? I think that what has happened, having seen a couple episodes of it, there is the realization that there are stories that are greater than what were talked about during Sex in the City. And they looked at the toys they had in the room, and it's a bunch of women who are about to turn or are currently 60 years old. And those are not the right people to tell some of these stories. With that being said, if someone was to tell me today, hey, we're doing a new version of Sex in the City, but we're going to add some diversity. We're going to add, it's not just about cisgendered women, but it's about all of the stories of finding love and true sex lives in New York City. I think there's a lot of people who would love to see that rather than season 27 of rich white people go to exotic resorts in unnamed location that's a Four Seasons hotel.
I do.
Geoff,
do
can I just say how much I appreciated
Yeah,
you
I think we all
talking
got something.
like a real New Yorker who used to go to concerts at CBGB when you were like, yeah, when they stopped doing the talking heads, I kept going.
I do want to say too, and just like I guess because I shat on and just like that a little bit too much. There is an extremely valid case to be made that, and we're seeing this increasingly more in media, of stories of women over the age of 50 being present and not just like a matronly figure or someone who's like super wise or
100%.
Yeah. And I love that so much. And I think this show being in trying to give people of that age or higher like an identity that's more than just being elderly or retired or anything like that. It just gives them a little bit more license to be like a person. And I think that is super important, and I should preface that as well.
There definitely needs to be space for both of these things. They are both good things. But I think one of these things is trying to be both of them. And we do not need that currently. We need room for both stories.
I think what's worth noting in this discussion, though, is that And Just Like That was created specifically for Max. It was a reboot / spin-off / requel that was made to specifically promote a separate streamer. Like it is, I haven't seen it, but like everything we're kind of touching around just feels like it's maybe a little bit out of touch. Maybe does some things right and some things wrong. I hope that we find a version of this New York centric story that eventually does find that inclusion in that sense. I'm sure there are a lot of versions saved onto people's final drafts right now that, hopefully see the light of day soon. Rosey, I promise when we bring you back for the third time this podcast, it will be for a show that does all of that and not just, Girls and Sex in the City for as delightful and fun and pro those shows as I am as well.
Max, you can't fucking make me go to Dubai. As hard as you're going to try, I'm not fucking going to Dubai. Well,
come on.
It'll be fun.
So persuasive.
Well, with that all being said, our plane is coming to a land, and I would love to be able to know where I can find you, but also where the folks who are listening to this podcast or watching us on YouTube can find you. Rosey, first of all, thank you so much for joining us again, being our New York correspondent. Where can the folks find you?
Thank you. I am existing on most social platforms at RoseyBeeme, Rosey Be Me. I just had a tremendously fun month of creating 90-second sketches in preparation for seeing Taylor Swift live. And
they're so good.
If you jump into me, thank you very much. I'm normally like kind of just like a fashion lifestyle girl, but I was becoming very creatively stagnant, and I wanted to give myself a challenge, and making myself put up a 90-second sketch every single day, like rain or shine, and get it out there, like, was so rewarding. And I think that if you come across me, that's the me you'll see. And I'm really proud of that person. So I'm glad that you're going to come to me in that form.
Rich, where can we find you?
I also just want to second that you should go follow Rosey on everything, because that Taylor Swift video series was absolutely hysterical, and my friends that I didn't even know followed you were sending me your videos, like unaware that like you're part of our agency, which is so incredibly fun. But you can also find me at the Real Club Chaos, which is Dave and Buster's, smoking a big old cigar before I get kicked out. And you can also find me on Instagram. You can also find me on Instagram at Damn That's Rich.
Max, what about you?
You could find me outside of actual Club Chaos. Please, does somebody know anyone who could get me in? You can also find me on all things social media at Maxwell Singh.
And you can find me trying to figure out where I can get a birthday cake delivered to me by drag queens while also eating my favorite Chinese food. You can find me on social media at RunJeffRun on Instagram and Twitter. You can find the TV Pilots License on YouTube, Twitter, and Instagram at TV Pilots License, as well as anywhere that you listen to podcasts. If you have a question for the show or about our next episode, we are partying down with Party Down for our next episode, and I cannot wait. So if you have a question, make sure to shoot us a DM or shoot us a voicemail at 213-290-1713. Make sure to watch out for our Instagram for reels, clips, as well as sneak previews for the upcoming shows. With the plane landed and the seatbelt sign off, we look forward to flying the bright skies of the TV world with you again soon. And until then, abso-fucking-lutely.
And just like that, the podcast is over.